Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my friend Tamer Hassan, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called White Ops. Tamer, thanks for coming by.
Great to be here.
This was actually easy for you to come over.
Yeah.
We're neighbors.
Not far.
Piece of cake,
Yeah.
piece of cake. Now, we're going to get into a lot of discussion about you and the tech, but tell me just briefly, what does White Ops do?
White Ops is a bot mitigation company, so we solely focus on the problem, is there a human on the other end of a screen, which ends up being a part of a variety of security and fraud use cases across industries and markets.
So I know a lot of people watching know what a bot is, but might be people who don't. What do you mean by a bot? Is that like some sort of zombie on a computer or something?
Yeah, that's one version of it, and it's one of the most interesting and fascinating topics that I've encountered in the last decade. And broadly, the problems that we've been dealing with are, if you can look like a million humans, what can you do? And so the game is, how do you look like a million humans? Sometimes that is a device farm on somebody's wall in some countries. Sometimes it's a data center farm. A lot of times it's actually a malware-based botnet. So they are infections on our own machines, on our devices, on our laptops at home and at work, which is a fascinating end result of a lot of cybercrime.
So people watching, a lot of them have maybe multiple bot agents or something running on their computer. Like
That's
their home
right.
computer or work computer.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. How would you know it's there?
Yeah, that's a question for a different group of security professionals. And
You might have the fan running all the time on your computer or something.
Well, I tell you how we see it's there. It's when they're used for the crime that they're intended for. Some botnets are used for ransomware, some are used for fraud, some are used for credential stuffing accounts on financial institutions. A lot of times they're multi-purpose, and it's just a matter of what code you load that day. And that's been the largest byproduct of our view in the last several years, is actually we're detecting the botnets at its use instead of at its infection.
That's cool. Now let's talk about you. How'd you get into this? Were you like a math science kid growing up?
Man, I was an engineer by trade and from a family of engineers and architects.
Yeah.
And
grew up in a lot of different places around the U.S.
Yeah, I moved quite a bit. Grew up mostly in Northern California. I spent some time in Southern Alabama, and then in the Air Force. Maybe a dozen different cities and towns in between. Yeah.
So high school went right into the Air Force Academy?
That's right.
Yeah. How'd you make that decision? That's a big decision for a young person.
It was, yeah, and there was a lot of debate between myself and my father and a few others, but ultimately I wanted to be an engineer and build things, and it was one of the best engineering schools around at that time. So I went with the express intention of being an engineer. And the Academy is a 4-year school that has academics and military training, right? You train to be an officer and a leader in this country's Air Force. And by the time you become a senior, your last year at the Academy, you realize that there's no officer in the Air Force that's doing real engineering. Like they're managing contractors in the civilian sector. So at that time also, that was the moment that 9/11 happened as well.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to fly, so I figured I would fly the things, and then I would come back and engineer them afterwards, and it would just give me a different vantage point.
What were you flying?
I flew a variety of things. I've been certified in about 7 different airframes, but most of my time, especially in the latter half, was search and rescue helicopters, Blackhawks, or the Air Force version, which is a Pavehawk rescue helicopter.
Did it make you jump out of some of those things?
In training, I've had to jump out of a few things, yeah.
How was that?
Yeah. Uncomfortable. Yeah. I would say the Air Force Academy is one of the only places in the world where they throw you out of a plane with a parachute your first time without a line or without an instructor strapped to you. Usually you go with a static line of the plane that pulls the chute and an instructor. Instead, no, they consider it character building.
You just keep your hand on is it a pull chain? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but you can't do that because if you don't have the right form, you're going to tumble. And so we spend weeks on the ground training and rehearsing, and then they push you out of a plane. And
seems like a good metaphor for cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
So after the military, did you go right into a career in cybersecurity?
So there's this in-between phase where I went from active duty to reserve, and where I had the opportunity to both serve and go to Afghanistan and Iraq and full-time do other jobs. So I was in engineering and took a path in data and analytics and BI stacks and things like that. And one of my problems and projects I was working on turned into a fraud scenario. And as I pulled on the threads and got introduced to a few people, I got introduced to my co-founders from security because somebody said this is not a math problem anymore. It's actually a security problem. So I connected with a couple of my co-founders.
Some pretty well-known co-founders.
Yeah, Dan Kaminsky, who's a fantastic researcher, Michael Tiffany, who is one of the best collaborators.
These are sort of geek heroes of mine, right?
Yeah,
I mean, these are amazing people, as are you.
They've been the whole team at White Ops
it is
been
a really
fantastic.
good management team.
It's one of those things
really,
where like attracts like, right? And when you have a mission and you have good people, you draw the same in. It's been amazing.
So when you started the company, was it immediately, let's dig into this problem of botnets? Was that the original consideration?
That was it. And a lot of the original research was actually around man in the browser type attacks. And it was a research problem, right? Because with those, where you log into your bank and you do your transaction and something else just does it along with you, right? That's a different problem. And you don't want to blacklist everybody with an infection. You want to tell the difference between the human and the malware, the bot, at the transaction level, which is a different problem than what everybody was tackling in bot mitigation. And so that's where it started.
Do you have to build behavioral algorithms to figure out what's going on?
No.
How do you do it? What's the secret sauce?
You can't build behavior. That's the thing.
Doesn't work.
The reality is things look more and more human all the time, and that's been the game. It's how human can you look, and can you look like a million humans? And a classic example in the behavioral or anomaly space is, a popular algorithm is the bot moves too fast through the pages of an application, and the user velocity. You're probably right. If it's too fast, it's not human. But if you're an adversary, your next move is pretty obvious, right? You'll slow it down. And if you're even smarter, you'll randomize the time. So, our approach was what we call technical evidence, and it's about looking for technical indications of automation and remote control, but it's also about creating the technical signal, right? We call it poking the bot and looking what the reaction is, and that changes the game. Sometimes the millisecond timing differentials are different than what you would expect for that architecture or that environment. And today, I mean, we can look at 2,500 to 3,000 different data points depending on the environment. We have a few hundred algorithms for technical evidence-based automation and remote control, but that was the foundation. On top of that, that's when you get into behavioral and machine learning, and it's the hybrid of those two things that make it really powerful.
Do you willfully become infected in order to properly characterize how a bot's operating? Do you have to do that?
Sometimes we do. The byproduct of our technology is that we detect whether something's automation or not. And if something is large enough and aggressive enough, we'll go figure out what the malware is, infect a bunch of machines, and start pulling apart. And it's been fantastic sometimes to see the behaviors there, and even sometimes there's functions named after White Ops to change how it interacts with our signal collection, and which is also an interesting game to play. But
what should people think about in terms of the threat for botnets? I know some people might know a little bit about, say, click bots and maybe DDoS. And how do you characterize it when you think, what are the problems that stem from these automated attacks? What's a good taxonomy for thinking about that?
Yeah, it's truly fascinating. So you zoom back out to, I'll ask everyone, if you can look like a million humans, what can you do? What would you do? The answer is you can change the popularity of something. You can change the inventory. You can change the dynamics of a marketplace or an application. So the things that we see are everything from advertising fraud, which is $300 billion spent for us to interact with content online, all the way to credential stuffing and account takeover attacks to get inside of a bank account and do fraud. There's a variety of things in the middle, everything from scraping of sensitive data to what we consider inventory fraud, reservation attacks, in online travel and inventory fraud in retail, where things are purchased and resold on aftermarkets, or oftentimes in the ticketing space. You can think of the concert space. It's an interesting incentive model where buying up all the tickets is one thing, or actually reserving them all and selling them in a secondary market is a problem. The same thing applies in travel and airline and hotels. So it's truly one of those problems where it's really about a bunch of humans, and it applies to a variety of industries and problems.
Did the digital advertising companies have some sort of perverse inverse incentive here with this problem? Because it does drive up the bill.
Yeah,
How do they jockey that problem? So they obviously don't want to be living in a cesspool of botnets. That's not right. But
right.
If it doubles the revenue, I don't know what the statistics are. Conceivable, it could double revenue, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
we've seen that.
What do they do? How do they react to this?
You get to see who's really who in that space, and broadly speaking, it's become an important issue and an issue of differentiation on quality. In the end, if you're not reaching human eyeballs, then you're not getting some return, and that becomes obvious at some layer. But
you're paying a big ad bill, and the salesmen are playing cards in the showroom, and you're wondering, what am I paying this bill for? Nobody's actually seeing it.
Yeah,
it's a terrible problem.
It is, and it's a fascinating one. And 8 years ago, it was different. Now it's much more talked about and accepted, and you see companies that think it's actually a moral obligation to clean it up, and also a competitive one. But you're right in that, if $1 billion is spent by an advertiser, 8/10 of that may go to everybody in the middle, and then 2/10 go to the fraudster. So for the fraudster's take, everybody gets paid, right? But largely speaking, there's some amazing companies in that space that have taken a strong stance on this and believe deeply in it. The other byproduct that I don't think a lot of people talk about or realize is that this is a funding mechanism for malware, for innovation and spreading malware. It's one of the highest gaps between profit and risk to do with a malware-based botnet. We can do a denial of service attack. There's an America's Most Wanted list for a denial of service attack. Fraud in digital advertising and media, it's recurring revenue for cybercrime. That goes right back into malware, and development goes right back into infecting new users because it's worth it. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics there.
For people who may not understand just how important you and your company are here, I'm going to tell a little story. So I'm at Newark Airport with my wife, and I buy my stack of magazines for the flight, and I buy Fast Company, and I open it up, and I sort of scream, take a picture, and texted you and said, dude, you're famous. Tell that story. You won, I don't know if it's winning, but you were kind of recognized in a way on Fast Company that's pretty unique. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and so every year Fast Company does the most creative people in business.
Yeah.
And there's amazing,
not in cyber, but in business,
yeah,
right?
And there's amazing people, right? And the guy who found water on Mars was on there. Women who have done amazing things in technology and in business. They're just a whole spectrum of amazing people. They always have, and they reached out to us and let us know that I was going to be on the list, which was amazing to me because I've been reading Fast Company for years. I used to. On my tours to Afghanistan and Iraq, I would take a stack of Fastco and Wired magazines and just read them over and over again. And I always knew I was going to get back to technology, and I always said to myself, I'm going to have a company one day that gets mentioned in Fastco, and what the end product was. And they didn't tell us where on the list anyone was going to be. So we figured we're going to be on the bottom of the list somewhere. It would be great to get to the middle, but it's amazing. It's amazing just that we're being there. And the day it came out, my phone explodes, and we're number one. We're number one on the list. It was, and it was surreal. It was surreal, but it was all for this large effort for a botnet takedown that we led called Eve, and it was one of those things that was truly a team effort inside White Ops, and then also a whole bunch of other companies and partners.
Well, you got to tell us that story because I know it leads to some people literally sitting in jail now.
Yeah.
How did the thing start, and What was the interaction with law enforcement through that whole engagement?
Yeah, it was unique and fascinating. Today we protect about 1 trillion events a week that we're analyzing, whether it's bot or not.
Well, what's an event?
Any kind of transaction. So it could be a page load, it could be an application interaction, any kind of interaction.
Got
it. Sometime next year we'll get to a trillion events a day just based on our existing ramp. But we see a lot of things and a lot of different types of bots and botnets. And when something gets big enough or starts to pique our interest, we'll start to pull the threads. And this was one of those. We saw it when it was really small, and we saw it get a little bit bigger and then make some big jumps. And then we saw it become very adaptive, somewhat aggressive, to the point where eventually, during the course of this, it got to over 12 billion events a day, interactions a day it was doing. And
what was it doing?
It was interacting with web pages, with advertisements, essentially stealing ad dollars,
fraud.
Fraud, yeah.
Flat out fraud.
Generating significant amount of monetary value in fraud. And so when something becomes big enough, we start to take interest and pull on the threads. We have a threat intelligence team, amazing team that starts to really dig in. And we'll start to reverse engineer the malware and look at the indicators and start to collaborate with the broader security community and our customers. And so we started to pull in some of our partners and folks that we work with. I reached out to the folks at Google that we collaborate with quite a bit, and we started to put together a strategy. White Ops was supporting another law enforcement case at the time, another bot that we had discovered a while back, and when it got aggressive enough, I reached out to law enforcement and said, hey, you should look at this. What happened in the private sector was fascinating. It started to pull together partners, and there's always this discussion on what to do next. You just expose it, that probably stops it. And at White Ops, we have this, we've built around this deep belief that it's about the economics and incentives. If you can't change the cost model to an adversary, we'll never win. The only real way to suppress cybercrime and fraud is to change the cost of the crime. And sometimes that's law enforcement, sometimes that's technology. There's a variety of ways to do it. And so there's this debate that forms of, we got to release it now and let the world know. It's good attention, but it also ends the fraud. But we know how that plays out over and over again. We see it all the time in the security community, right? They'll go underground, all the evidence is destroyed, and they'll retool and come back. And it's a short-term thing. You're not playing the long game. You're not actually addressing the problem. So it's actually a really tough thing to do with a bunch of companies. But we started to pull together this amazing group of companies. It ended up being 30 companies in ad tech and security, ISPs, the whole 9 yards, to collaborate and support uncovering what's on the other side of this and let the FBI do their job to bring consequences. And the result of that was 8 indictments of Russian cyber criminals. 3 of them have been extradited, and they're in Brooklyn right now behind bars awaiting trial. 2 of them pled guilty last month. And the whole thing, from the time we sent the lead to the FBI to the time folks were in jail was less than 24 months, and that's unheard of. A case like this should take 5 to 7+ years, but because of that collaboration, because of the scale of data and the technical data that we were able to support the investigation with, because of a lot of factors, it ended up being 12 months, which is historic. It was the largest private sector collaboration with FBI cyber in history that I know of, and I talk to a lot of people inside of DOJ when I get the opportunity to try and find other examples.
As a company, did you need to engage legal counsel either internally or externally? Because you're probably in the middle of that.
Yeah.
We're thinking, whoa, because legal considerations are enormous.
Absolutely.
For that. What did you do?
Yeah.
Do you have a good counsel, or did you have to hire some lawyers?
Yeah, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
We did this, and with our customers. And we would never, I think getting the FBI involved is a good thing to do when it warrants it. It's not for every case, and it's certainly not the case if your customers don't want to. So we went to our customer base and said, hey, do you want to be a part of this? Do you want to support this? And they did. And we got some level of trust, which with the team and FBI Cyber that was working on this, that they were going to respect the private sector collaboration on this and not take advantage of it unnecessarily. So there was a lot of dynamics that I think made it different. Traditionally, I think it's hard to collaborate with law enforcement for a variety of risk-based reasons, but if we really actually want to win and change the game, getting that collaboration right is a huge part of it.
I've had a lifetime personally in that space. And one thing people may not realize that I know you were probably thinking about is that when you do engage with law enforcement, then you can basically kiss your best people goodbye for X number of weeks or months.
Right.
And there's no revenue there.
Right.
Like if you're in business and you start engaging with law enforcement, which you should do, it's hard because it's not like those are billable hours or anything, and you're not working on behalf of clients. You're doing something that's the right thing to do, but it takes a lot of guts. I'm sure you guys are a successful company, but it does take a little bit of guts to say, hey, we're going to go spend 2 years on something that's going to make zero money.
There was a lot of effort and man hours, but in the end, it goes back to it proved the thesis, right? What can you really do if you can actually start to tip the balance?
Exciting story. Hey, when you think about the future, what comes to mind?
Oh man, a lot of things. I think there's some exciting changes and problems to work on. The idea of collective protection against fraud and abuse is a real one. And
collective meaning a lot of different companies and organizations,
right?
Working together,
collaboration, and that's a variety. There's a variety of layers there, from sharing intel to collaborating to building a platform of shared knowledge to the customer base, right? The most powerful thing that came out of Eve and even a variety of other operations was all of our customers in the same room, a handful of them, because they have a bunch of business indicators that are interesting and relevant, and they start to work together, right? And so, one thing, there's a lot of transition in AppSec right now, and one thing we can be certain of is that there's an adversary. They're oftentimes better funded, and we should just assume they're smarter, right? We all know that defense is a really hard place to be. And I think historically we haven't been playing to win. And there is a way to play to win, right? And it comes back to, can you address the cost and consequence? Can you change the incentive model? Can you leverage collective protection, right? And can you crowdsource the cost, right? There's no reason every company should be paying the R&D cost to fight an active adversary, right? There should be some level of shared knowledge and collaboration, and all that's important. In the military, in the Air Force, in all branches of the military, you would never play to lose, right? That's not an option. I think in security, it saddens me sometimes that some companies are not truly playing to win. Not everybody. There's some amazing companies that really are. But you would never go out without a winning strategy, and you would cheat if you had to for national security.
Well, that dumb story about the two guys with they're going through the woods and they see a tiger, and the one guy gets down, starts putting his running shoes on. You know this joke?
Yeah.
And the guy goes, "You can't outrun a tiger," and he says, "Dude, I just need to outrun you."
Right.
And I think that characterizes the strategy of most companies in cybersecurity. It's like, probably not going to win, but maybe if I put up a big enough fuss, they'll go hit some other bank, not me. I think that goes through the minds of a lot of people. That is a losing strategy. I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what most people think. That dumb joke about the two guys with the sneakers seems to be pretty accurate in most cases. So who knows? Hey, you an AI guy? Do you think artificial intelligence is important, or where does it fit?
Yeah, I mean, AI is incredibly important. It's going to be incredibly powerful, but it's certainly not the answer.
Yeah.
It'll like anything, it's a tool and a very powerful one, and it's democratic. It can be used by good guys and bad guys, and so I think it'll be an important part of the future, a critical part, but we should also understand that it will be that case for the other side as well. Yeah. And you see that, botnets present a really good example of that, we think that AI and behavioral analysis will be the winning ticket, but we have to remember that somebody else is running code on 1 million humans, and they have access to sometimes a better data set than the good guys, should they choose to use it. So I think it'll certainly play a role, but we should remember that the thing that wins is going to be the strategy, not the tool.
You've developed into quite the CEO. Look at you, you're doing an amazing job there. You started as the CTO.
That's right, yeah.
Now CEO, enjoying the job and enjoying running the company and everything.
It's been quite a change, and not one that I expected or anticipated. I felt, and at the time, in the first 7 years of White Ops, I was the CTO. I ran engineering and detection research and product, and I felt I had the best CTO job in tech. Right, we had a great mission, a really good team, good tech, and a pretty significant budget I could spend on winning the mission. Detection efficacy is everything to the company, and so I think there's very few times as a CTO you have all of that, and so I was quite happy. But there was an opportunity to step into the CEO role, and the board of directors of the company felt that at this phase with bots and bot mitigation becoming a problem across markets and industries, that there had to be a product and technology-led strategy. And so I did, and I've been surprised by some things and not so surprised by other things. But I truly I believe in the mission, and I'm excited about the future regardless of the role.
Well, Fast Company this year, maybe you'll be Time Magazine Man of the Year next year.
I certainly hope not.
I would totally take a picture of that and text it to you. But it's been wonderful chatting with you. I could listen to you all day, and really appreciate you stopping by.
It's always great to catch up.
You bet. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Ed.
And we'll see you next time.